Welcome to White Label American Podcast. This is a podcast that brings you bold, in-depth interviews with interesting people that are mostly immigrants taking down artificial walls one story at a time. This is a podcast that empowers immigrants to share their stories and listen to those of others. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to another episode of White Label American. Thank you all for joining us today. We appreciate everyone who's been leaving 5 stars for us, sharing with your friends, lovers, secret families. Hey, don't judge, but keep doing what you do and just keep the support coming in. It's the season of holidays, so keep the love coming in. So we also remember our friends and loved ones who are alone at this time, sending love and shout out to each and every one of you. So I'm honored today to have a very large group of guests, all is full of creativity, right now in the studio. And I don't think I'll be able to go around introducing each and every one of them in order to save time. But we have 2 painters and a sculptor, right?
Mhm.
So we're going to let them spill the tea on all the goodness that we have in here. And we have different countries. Well, 2 countries, 2 countries. Well, there's 2 ties to one country, but there's ties to other countries. And then we have our American brother in here too. But everybody is connected one way or the other. So without much further ado, who do we have in the studio? So we'll go alphabetically. So starting to the person right next to me, I think your name's, alphabetically, you're also the first.
Amir Bey,
Yes?
mixed media sculptor, I interdisciplinary artist, different things.
All right. Oh, okay. So welcome, Amir Bey. And who do we have next?
Nkem. I'm a painter, and I think the general consensus is that my work is surreal.
Lovely. Okay, we'll touch on that later. And last but not the least,
Obinna Elechi, and I'm an artist and designer.
all right. Awesome. And welcome to the studio. And glad you all could join us today. Fun fact, the last time I had a friend called Obinna, or I was in touch with someone called Obinna, it ended up in a very dark tale.
Oh, wow.
But I had a very good friend whose name was Obinna, and we were really tight back in my Port Harcourt days.
Uh-huh.
And it was just about a year or 2 before I got my visa that we began to lose touch. So when good supporter of the podcast, Rich, put me in touch with you, I was like, oh, could this be Obinna that I'm connecting with again? I was like, oh, but I saw the photo. I was like, oh man, because he's way tall and much light skinned. Back then, he was one of the lighter skinned folks in my crew. Well, amongst my friends that I had, but he was legendary for being very light skinned amongst us. But it was unfortunate what happened to him. The what's it called when amongst Igbo people, the apprenticeship, where you serve a master for like 18 years and then he helps you open your own store. You know what I'm talking about?
Like in Abba.
Yeah, but it's not limited to only Abba, it's everywhere.
Mm.
So he had something like that, but
I see.
the man claimed he stole something from him, so he won't help him.
I
And
see.
He got very the dispute got very big and police got involved. And I was like, oh, that was the first time I became aware that some people refuse to help you move on,
Mhm.
and there's ways they can cheat you out of it.
Mhm, mhm.
Because it was the last time I saw him, he was in a very bad place.
I see.
So
I see.
that's how I became aware that people can exploit that system.
Mhm.
Because like over here, I've seen people talk about it like, oh, in Nigeria, there's this system of apprenticeship and we should have it in the West. We don't have it in other places. I'm like, yeah, it sounds very good.
Mhm.
But like every system, there's loopholes that people can abuse. And if you don't talk about that. You don't mention the good, the bad, the pros and cons.
Mhm.
You don't talk to the victims.
Mm.
Then it's just there's a predator always waiting in there. Like,
Mhm.
yep.
The West isn't a high trust. Like, we're not a high trust country anymore, or a high trust society.
Hmm.
That might be.
Well, I think people just like to throw stuff online and just say, I just came into this knowledge and it's perfect. And I'm like, yeah, it's not. Nothing is perfect.
Mm.
Everything, yeah, you have to look into the details and then
Mhm.
throw it out there. But that's not what people want to find out about. People want to find out about you guys. So you guys have something coming up, right?
Yes, we do.
Mhm.
A
So
3-person exhibition.
yes, let us know about that because I forgot to mention that. So yeah. Let the audience know what's
So
popping.
we're all artists who show at Gallery Particulier, which is a nonprofit art gallery in Brooklyn on Maple Street. And Gallery Particulier was very lucky to be given a space by Chashama, an arts nonprofit on East 64th, and is programming a 3-person show focused on, very much in line with the podcast, it's called Triangulation, and it's about migration, not only of people, but of influences
Hmm.
in art.
And what inspired this idea to have
Question.
this exhibit?
I feel like with the work that Obinna, Amir, and I do, it almost just kind of happened organically. Like, it's work that makes a lot of sense together and is very heavily influenced by Africa. And like, I know you do a lot of Afrofuturist work,
Mhm.
you have your comics, and your sculptural practice really leans into that, especially materially and I guess just symbolically with my work. But you guys should say more.
Well, I just always like following the art. And one thing that I was telling Arabella, who is one of the founders of Gallery Particulier, is that, years ago, I took an ebony piece of mine that's going to be in the exhibit, Moya Rojo, to a gallery director in Michigan. And she looked at it and she said, "Oh, Picasso already did that." And I thought, I was stunned because this is really the first time I'd gone to a non person of color gallery. And right away, she had this Eurocentric take on what I did. And I explained, I said, well, Picasso is just looking at African art. And I also am using African traditional tools and carving this piece. It was Nigerian ebony that I had. And, but I was stunned. And she said, yes, well, like this. And her attitude was one thing that I hadn't encountered. And then the other thing was that, I was like astounded because for me, this was my original idea, something that was so meaningful for me personally. And then here's somebody who's rejecting it by an artist that I still have not studied. I admire, but I have not studied Picasso. So I don't really follow that person. If I follow anybody, well, like the person who turned me on to African carving, he had a contact in Nigeria, and he would send, like, for $20, like in the 70s, $20, and you would get a nice carving axe, traditional carving axe, and carving knives. Right,
Wow.
two different types of axes,
Okay.
and then 2 different knives. And so that was the thing I was inspired to carve wood and stone, but carving wood with these traditional axes.
Wow.
And so that was the thing, and so that's me. That was my route. It was not really one that just in my personality too. I'm kind of very private individual, sort of. I mean, I follow my own way. And so this is what my art reflects. I'm not going to say it's African inspired, but I know better than to say that it is African art, because African art is something completely different, but it is also something that is a source for me. So that's one thing I say. Also, I've always admired EBO art. I mean, EBO is just really something,
Mhm.
like just the mass and the carving in it. So those are I guess my earlier visual roots is African, but also pre-Columbian South American art. And also art from India too, which the stone temples, the carvings, very much into what has been inspiring for me.
Real sculptor.
Yeah.
Yeah, I loved it. And then I used to imagine, this is when I was in my crazy 20s, is wow, the world, if everything was just carved, like these buildings,
I think that all the time with like contemporary architecture and all the steel and the glass. And I'm just like, no, we need to go back.
We need to carve. We need to touch it. We need to be involved in it. Like, yeah, I mean, that's something that, and the glass and steel, well, that's another thing. But I also recognize now that there's different approaches to art. Like at one time I used to carve outside. That was it. Like the sun, the wind, and then just hitting the stone or the wood, But eventually, now I see, but there's many other kinds of influences that can be beneficial and approaches. And so one thing that's been happening for me is using the Japanese style brushes and sumi ink, and just very expressive to use the ink. And so that's something that has been, and I'll have some of that work in the exhibit as well.
Awesome. So, yeah.
So I think similar, we all, like Grace mentioned, we all have different ties and inspiration from the continent of Africa. And for me, having grown up in 3 different continents, before I was 20, I think it showed me good and bad things and questionable things that I've always wanted to find some way to express. And being influenced by, like I said before, cartoons, comic books, that was my escape a lot of the time. And I think the work I'm doing now is basically trying to funnel a lot of those questions that I've had for a long time and just put them into that format that I've known and liked since I was a kid. So that's the type of stuff that will be at this show as well.
I paint because I'm an art historian. That's what I study, and it's hard to be an art historian living in the West who isn't primarily studying the Western tradition of art. But I really just visually am.
Wait, what tradition of art do you study?
Well, I mean, art history, I went to Columbia, and as it's taught there, it's impossible to say it's anything other than Western art history and a Western perspective, inevitably on art from other cultures and regions of the world. Because, I mean, like with African sculpture, what we're looking at and calling African art was not made as a sculpture, as a work of art that goes into a museum. Most often, especially the stuff I love, are ritual objects.
Okay.
Masks, stools, primarily that were made with no concept of like fine art in mind, that were used on set days of the calendar year or used for set purposes. Or like one of my favorite objects ever is the Nkisi. It's it's often a sculpture of a little figure and nails get put in it. And what it does is it bears witness to deals and agreements. And it's like every nail is another conversation that was had with the piece present. I really think of it. And they always have these striking eyes. I really think of it as something that bears witness. But it's in no way until the 19th century, I guess, was that looked at as a sculptural art object. That was just a part of life. It would be like looking at a Herman Miller Aeron today and sticking that in a museum in 300 years. But where was I going with this? Fine art and art history as we know it today, especially if we look at like the art market and what it is it's Western. It's a Western imposition of what of a certain way of reading the objects that we make and live with and interpreting them. Because I really don't think someone in Igbo land like 500 years ago was carving a mask and being like, and that's going to the Met.
Right.
Yeah,
But at the same time, I
hear
don't
you
mean
on
to.
that.
At the same time, I do not mean to denigrate or
Mhm.
lower the status
Mhm.
of these objects at all, because now
Mhm.
globalization's happened.
Mhm.
And now it is art,
Mm.
even if it wasn't created with that intention whatsoever. Because I mean, there are people. There's one sculptor whose name I can't remember, but I'm gonna Google and say later.
Yeah.
Who does like a Sinufo style carving of these what would have been like head crest masks. He's I believe he's Ghanan, and he's going completely traditional with it, but it is fine art now. It's being made in the 21st century, and I don't
Mhm.
think our history or historical context or contemporary context can be escaped when thinking about art.
Oh, okay. I see where you're going. So please, can you introduce us to your place of birth and what childhood was like for you? So let's start with Amir.
Well, I was born New York Hospital, and first 6 years of my life, I was in the Lower East Side, and my parents split up, and my mother's from Ann Arbor, Michigan, so she went back to Michigan, and me and my brother went there. But I also continued to grow up here in New York with my father's side of the family, and I always liked art, I guess, and I didn't think that I was an artist, but like in school, kids would notice that I would just do something and do it very easily, paint or ceramic or whatever. It was just natural for me to do it, and then my grandmother, who worked at a school, gave me a bunch of books of Greek mythology
Mm.
and history. And wow, like I just started acting out like the myths, and like it was just incredible. All these, like stories and river goddesses and
Yeah.
things, and then my father noticed that I like painting, so he got me some oils. And I'm a self-taught artist, though. I'm saying that because by the time that I had left home, I was always just painting, and then when I lived in California, I started working with natural materials,
Oh, okay.
wood, stone things, and deer antlers, and carving. And so carving was really the thing that took me off.
All right.
Yeah.
Before we jump to California, because
Mm.
we'll stay with childhood for some time. So
Okay.
you bounce between New York and Michigan.
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
So we'll come back to that for a little bit because there's still some questions I would love to ask
Mhm.
about that.
Mhm.
So let's jump to Grace. So can you introduce your place of birth?
Yes, I was born in Tver, Russia. That's Tver in Russian.
T-
Na Russkом. Tver.
Tver.
Tver. It's about 2
Okay.
hours north of Moscow, 2.5 hours on the Volga River.
Okay, you're our third guest born in Russia, but we've had two in Moscow, and what's I'm trying to remember my knucklehead brother who I always call
St.
my comrade.
Petersburg?
Nah, he's far away.
Vladivostok.
It's
Krasnodar.
the cosmonaut, the headquarters of Cosmo. How's it called?
Roscosmos? I don't remember.
Yeah, it's like it's big for space study of space. Like 600 years ago, they were already big on that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh.
So
know
that's where he was born. But his parents are from Azerbaijan.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, my mom is Russian. My dad's Nigerian. He studied medicine in Russia, and they met at college.
Mhm.
And here I am. Much like your parents, Amir, though, they split.
Mhm.
And my dad, he lives in Lagos now. I moved back to Nigeria, and my mom married again and moved to the U.S. with me in tow, and now lives in California with my stepdad. And I grew up in California. I feel, if anything, California's had the biggest cultural impact on me. But yeah, I feel very plainly like American. But I've been here since I was 4, so that makes sense. Though growing up at home, I was very much in like aware of like, okay, foreign. Like I spoke Russian at home, and so on and so forth. And but my grandma and great grandma live in Brighton Beach, so New
Oh,
York.
okay.
We'd visit New York a lot, and I was really lucky to come here for college because I never learned how to drive, and family here. And I'm very embarrassed to say I've never been to Nigeria. That's silly and embarrassing for me, but
Nah,
yeah. And
no,
I
no,
started
no,
making
it's okay.
art also very organically as a
Mm.
child. Just kind of, it was just like a thing to do. It was a hobby my parents really encouraged. They were very like, oh, don't eat too much sweet candy, don't watch too much TV, like draw, collect rocks, do stuff like that, which was great. But then by the time I was old enough to be like, oh, I wanna do art for a living, then at that point it was like, oh, no, you need to go into a STEM field. You need to take some math
Oh, okay.
classes.
So
You need to-
you became a good
And then-
the immigrant
The immigrant
kid.
kicked in.
Yeah, kicked
And
in. The
I,
5 professions
And
became available.
I applied to school for literally, it was architecture and environmental law were like the majors I applied to school with. And then I ended up being an art history major because you really cannot put that, like I at least cannot put that much effort into something I'm just not good at. It doesn't come naturally to me that way. But art history was kind of as close as I could get to studying visual art, which I now really think I should have just done instead. And I just kept painting in the background, almost as like a secretive, shameful little hobby. And I took, you guys were talking about comics earlier. I took one class on how to draw anime when I was 10 years old. And then I took an art class in high school where we didn't actually learn how to draw. We were just given materials. I took one painting class in college.
Okay,
taught by a conceptual artist.
Wait. You're going too far. You're going too far. I love that, but you're going too far. You're spilling too much tea.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
You're going to the future.
Well, that's it for me.
We gotta come back.
I'm open about, you know what? I want to be a painter. Corporate life isn't for me.
Okay. See, there are things in your story that, sometimes I get envious when I hear stuff like that because, I grew up in Nigeria, had all the my full package was Nigerian. That was never an option. Like, I never knew that was a possibility. And I was like, dang, yeah, the class in anime. Like, I even know it was called anime until, probably as an adult. That's when I realized it was called anime. So
my mom needed me to do something that wasn't just watching TV.
yeah.
So she took me to the community center, and there was one dude who taught anime courses. And I remember I loved it, but then he just kind of disappeared one summer.
That's funny.
Oh wow. But yeah, that's the stuff that I'm glad kids of today have more exposure to. But yeah, we'll come back to all that. So Obinna, can you please introduce us to your place of birth and your childhood.
So I was born in Port Harcourt, Nigeria.
Hey, my people.
And when I was about 9.5, 10, my family moved to Holland for my dad's work. And I think similar to both Amir and Grace, my parents noticed that I had drawing came easy to me, and watching a lot of TV like Thundercats and Voltron and stuff like that.
Yep, Ultimate. Voltron is classic.
Right. We had these sugar cubes, the blue sugar cube cases in Nigeria from the 80s and 90s.
That's the little sugar that counted.
Exactly. I would make Voltron figures from those by just cutting it up.
Uh-huh.
We didn't have toys, so that's how you made your toys. So they encouraged like making things and drawing and stuff like that. So lived in Holland for about 7 years. And then came to the States for school. And
okay, wait. We don't need to go to, because you're getting close to adult years. But,
no.
Where in Port Harcourt were you at?
Close to mile 1. I want to say
mile 1.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I don't know if that...
I know the market, mile 1.
Yeah,
that was mile 1. Also had an Abar Road, old Abar Road.
That area.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Because
So,
I'm beginning to forget some of my Port Harcourt names.
yeah.
Because since I left, I haven't been back there. Pitaqua Town, the old name is Pitaqua. Well, one of the nicknames Pitaqua. Wow. So, do you remember any memories from Port Harcourt?
Yeah, I think some of the early ones were things like drawing and a lot of that type of stuff, and those were some of the fonder memories that I had, at least like as much as I can remember when I was 10.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, I haven't had my one in a long time.
Mhm.
Yeah, I used to go there to buy. Yeah, I think around this time of the year would have been when I'll play around my one because you get some good deals
Yeah,
around there. The market
the
there.
market there.
Yeah, especially if you had somebody you're trying to impress. You went around there to you don't tell them you went there. Of course you claim you went to the fancier part of town, but you didn't have money to go shop there. So you go down and you go very early in the morning, when the stuff, just the clothes are coming out from the barns or what they call them. And it's like, okay, brand new. Yep. Okay. Yep. Give me that one. I got 500. Nah, and then you haggle, get your deal, and then make it look like you got a receipt or something, and put a label on it. Then show up like, oh, I got you this straight from that boutique, that brand new boutique over there. But now they got malls and all that. So I'm like, dang, y'all don't know that experience of waking up at
haggling
5 o'clock in the morning and going through.
I feel like I have that experience buying mushrooms at the farmer's market here every Sunday. All the chicken of the woods is gone by like noon.
Yep, farmer's market. I got that here too. Because the place I used to like to buy fish from at Grand Army Plaza. It's if you went there around 11, it's too late. So I was like, dang, yes. But I didn't compute that it was similar to my experience in Port Harcourt. So you see, that was the training. So Obinna mentioned fonder memories. So that was actually tied to my next question. So what do you consider? Most of you had grew up in different cities. Well, you grew up in between New York. For Amir, you grew up between New York and Michigan.
Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Sorry, Ann Arbor.
Yeah.
Michigan. So when it comes to your fondest childhood memories, what are they, and where did that take place?
Fondest. Wow. Now I have to really go into something there.
That's why you're here.
It's funny because there are a lot of them. But one of the things that I think that's relevant to me being an artist is that I always enjoyed doing things or studying or, like, in other words, absorbing something and then trying to act it out.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't really explored it very much, but I could be into theater just for that reason, just because, I try to express and act out certain fantasies and ideas.
Yeah.
And actually, even though I've studied my history a lot, my family history and the history of African Americans and America and everything else. But when it comes to my work, I like fantasy. I like to imagine things, and I feel more freedom in doing that than if I have to just very strictly try to address certain issues. Even though I do that, especially if I'm curating a show, the theme might be that, something social. But personally, I like to just take material or something and fly with it. And so those were some of my happy things. And then I also like the contrast between Ann Arbor and New York, because in Ann Arbor, much of it was still not, when I was growing up, some of it was still like wild, like the town, you would have a lot of wooded areas. You had little ponds you can play in. And then New York, on the other hand, didn't have that. Although I remember seeing, like, there was one place in Queens I could see the Empire State Building from a tree, that kind of thing. Wow. But New York had a whole nother thing. It was about people and it was about my family on that side.
I just finished this show on Netflix, The Blue-Eyed Samurai. And I was watching the behind the scene, behind the making of the show, and one of the creators, I think Noizumi, is her name. Noizumi. She talked about how, because it's set in the Edo period of Japan, and it was after she had her baby, and her daughter has blue eyes, and that kind of triggered something within her to tell a story. But she she had, like, instead of telling the story in the present, she took it into, and I've heard a version that goes way deeper, but the version she chose to tell on this platform was, I'll take this story of my child being half Japanese, that at a certain point in time was considered a monster.
Mm.
But instead of, and talk about the story of identity, navigating a world that sees you this way.
Mm.
And there's a way you can tell that story in the present, or you can use it, you can tell it with history and all that. But she took it and told it in animation. And there are people who are like, "Oh, why isn't this a full feature movie?" Because the animation is great, fantastic, and it's beautiful. The action is fantastic in the show. But they told in a 10 episode series, and you see all those themes. Because I watched it at first, when I watched the first episode, I was like, "Oh, is this just going to be a typical revenge story?" It looks like a western, like a revenge story, but it goes way deeper when you start watching. And I'm like, "Oh wow, I see what you did there." So now when she's talking about this, it's like she used fantasy to now reimagine the whole story that she's telling. And when you mention fantasy, that's what just popped up in my mind. That yeah, there's a way you can do storytelling, but even history. Like there's a history reenactment. Like I remember when the Woman King, the movie came out, and there were people who, like, somebody who is a friend of mine. We had a debate, and he was one of those who was like, I would have loved this movie if they had stuck to why wasn't like 100% historically correct. And I was like, I don't know why it tends to be black movies, or movies from a black creative, that tends to get hit with that type of criticism. But first of all, it's supposed to be entertaining. So if it doesn't hit the entertaining check mark, a lot of people going to tune out. But while it's entertaining, you can also do the work. You can tell that history that you want to tell. You can tell that.
Well, history is
reenactment.
storytelling.
It's storytelling.
And
people
whoever
seem to-
tells the
it seems to
story,
go over their head, and
yeah.
it's like, it's supposed to be like something I get from National Geographic. I'm like, then go watch on National Geographic. They have stuff for you there. There's a whole bunch
Best
of
historical films are
there's a whole lot of stuff there. But it's like, when it comes to black creative, it must be 100% this, and I'm like, no, it can be fantasy.
Well, I believe that the truth. I mean, what I'm saying is, like, let's say creative storytelling
Yes.
gives insight, but then there is a lot of BS too that's passed off as history.
Yes,
And I think
agree.
that has to be clarified. Like, like if you're having a creative license about a story, you should say that. You shouldn't really say that, well, this is actually what this person did, even though this person did not do that.
Oh yeah, I'm on that.
Yeah, and
I'm on that because I watched. There's a
movie.
I think it was something Oz, or something. I think Lost City of Oz or something like that. But it was one of these guys who was supposed to go look for a city in a lost city in South America. It's on Amazon Prime, and the guy from what's that show with the bikes, gangs on the motorbikes? Very popular show. I never watched it, but it was just quite popular amongst my friends. So I was free that night, and I said, "Let me watch this movie." And it ends in a place where it looks like he died while he found the indigenous tribe, but he died. And I was like, "Wow, this movie seems compelling. Well, let me look up this person and see what his life was about." And I looked it up, and it was a total. The movie was a lie. It was totally 100% a fabrication of what this person was in real life. He was a racist. He made up a whole bunch of stuff. The movie couldn't have been. It was like they whitewashed his image.
Can you imagine how I felt when I found out that Marie Antoinette didn't actually own a pair of Converse like she did in the Sofia Coppola movie?
Right.
I didn't-
No, but actually, I think that the fictional narrativization of history is really important. It's a fun part of cultural myth making, and we shouldn't hold directors or screenwriters to the tier we hold historians.
Yes.
I mean, so much of Western culture has been like self-mythologization. I hate to think that like Black creatives couldn't have the same kind of agency. It sucks. But also we're in a totally kind of like post-truth moment where people feel really also like
You can
where
say,
people
I call it
almost feel
emotional truth after the person. who-
people feel like some kind of anxiety
that.
about like the accuracies or inaccuracies or perceptions of everything that they see on screen. They almost feel entitled to have their version of it out there all the time,
Yeah.
or a version that agrees with their personal sensibilities. And I'm like, that's kind of anti-creative. It's very
True.
anti-creative.
Yeah, but I think though that there's so much misinformation and distortion, particularly about African history, Black history, the history of people of color.
Yes.
That it makes me think of maybe improvisation. Like it's good to improvise like with an instrument, but you still have to know the fundamentals. You know, you have to know how to play the tune to be able to improvise creatively with it. And instead, if you're just taking the instrument and the song and you're really basically just not even paying like tribute to it, then there's a problem because that's already what's happening, and people are not analytical. They're not actually looking at something and making a judgment, which is why a book is good. Because if you're reading, you have to analyze, you have to think when you're reading. But if you're viewing something like a film, you're not necessarily thinking, you're absorbing. And so there's a problem then with all the misinformation that's happening, you know. And so like growing up, you know, I really felt bad about being Black. Why? Because everybody else had their culture. You know, like people who were Irish, they talked about a shillelagh. You know, they had all these artifacts and they had all these things that they could relate to. And there was nothing that I could think of being an African-American that, at least I thought at first, that was really like that. But then all around me, though, my parents, my mother, my grandparents were talking about the history. They were talking about like, well, let me see, my great going back, there were 6 Indian women, and 6 of them were with white men, but one of them was with an African American. So that was one of my ancestors.
Oh, wow.
So just thinking about these 6 Indian sisters, you know, and what that was like in the early 1800s in this country, in South Carolina. You know, very rich. In other words, we have a very rich history, you know, but we ignore it, or it's covered up, or we don't like, just like I'm saying, as I was growing up, I didn't respect my history. But then as I got older and started doing my own research on it, I said, damn, like my great-grandfather, he was a Ecuadorian sailor from the 19th century. And he sailed, he came to New York before the bridge was built, the Brooklyn Bridge was built, you know, and I remember him because he lived to be an old man. So I said, wow, that's my connection to so much there, you know, and so we have to find, I think that the truth is really more rich and more rewarding than any fiction.
Yes.
You know, but we have to recognize it. We have to embrace it because that's who we are.
Exactly.
Like earlier, we were talking about book banning and stuff that's happening in Florida right now, and in the country in general. And to your point about Amir, about knowing your history. Knowing your history, as painful as it is, it seems like they're trying to erase what happened during slavery in this country.
Oh, yeah.
And
Absolutely.
intentionally. And it doesn't hurt to, now, at least for the young generation, you should know what happened. It's not going to make anything better necessarily if you don't know about it. It's better that you learn about it and know about it so you can avoid pitfalls like before. But it's important to know and value your history. And today, people have their own versions of history that they're trying to force down people's throats. And it's important to find ways to fight that, I think.
So oh, sorry.
Erasing a genocide like that just makes room further down the line for like manufacturing consent for further genocide. Because I mean, I'm not going to get into politics, but
Right.
Well, we are
that's
political
what
animals.
being
One
an
thing
artist
like
means,
to
I think, is,
men-
we're storytellers. And so we portray our personal as well as our collective experience. And so that we're creating documents
Yes.
of not only personal documents, but of our times. So that's something that is, I think, is an important role and way to think about is, what is the value of our work in the context of it that as we're creating, and then what is the thing that maybe inspires us or motivates us, and what is it finally that we contribute? These are some of my thoughts. And it's funny because I was thinking some of these thoughts earlier, like when I was younger, I was very self-conscious about my clothes, the clothes I would wear. I was self-conscious about my hair, the texture of my hair, everything, because it was different, not because there was anything wrong with it, but just because it didn't behave, like the way other people's stuff did,
Yeah.
One of my fondest childhood memories was shaving my head when I was 15.
Mm.
I had straightened my hair from the age of 5 to 15, and it was just fried. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna do a buzz cut, and I randomly did it with I think literally my stepdad's shaving, beard shaving clipper, and never went back. Never straightened it again. There we go. I was so self-conscious about
You
my
were
hair
beautiful
until
all the
then.
time.
Well,
All that
thank
time.
you.
You were beautiful all that time, and you didn't give yourself credit.
For all who know, I had straightened my hair into a scene emo kind of hairstyle. It was really a mess, but that was the thing to do, and I was aware I lived in a very majority white town in Southern California, and for anyone who doesn't know this about California, when you go inland, it goes conservative.
Yes.
It's on the coast that are the kind of liberal bastion of Ivory Tower, yada yada. But it just goes red if you go inside.
I mean, Berserkly, and those are the radical.
My high school banned critical race theory, and it's about an hour from San Diego. So
Wow.
Yeah, glad to be out of there.
Hi, everyone. If you're new to the podcast or a returning listener and you enjoy what we are doing here, did you know that you could enjoy more of our content and also support our work via Patreon? For as little as $3 per month, you get access to loads of bonus content that you'll find nowhere and be the first to the latest news. Don't miss out. Go to patreon.com/White Label American Pod. Or just search for White Label American Podcast on Patreon. Patreon. Before I move to the next question, there was something that, when you were talking about your history, our history, not just yours. Have you documented your family's history? Do you have it documented, or have you documented it in any way?
Yes, I have. I've done research. I was actually inspired by Alex Haley.
Okay.
Now, it turns out he did not tell a lot of truth. He's somebody who lied a lot. But he did inspire me when I was 23. I heard this, where he's recounting how he did his family research, which a lot of that, he actually stole some of that. That's another story. But so that inspired me, and I got my father to interview my great aunts. I interviewed my grandparents, and then I started discovering ancestors that they didn't know about, and just branches of the family. Like one branch, I have yet to find the slaves on that one.
Wow.
That goes back to maybe even before the Revolutionary War. That branch, and then. There's, some that were known, like on two sides of my family, there were craftsmen. And, in the 19th century, you were known for your craft, your reliability to carve, to make cabinets, to, all of that. And so one of them his work was in demand. He was what you could call a semi-slave because, he was able to make a living even though he was like owned by somebody else. He was enslaved by somebody else, but he was, people wanted his furniture, And then on another side of the family, this guy had a bank account. Now he was free, but he was a mulatto, so he had certain privileges. But he still had to, you had to pay $50 tax every year to maintain your freedom in South Carolina. Even if you were so-called free or mulatto, you had to pay. And $50 was a lot of money.
That was big money.
If you missed those payments, they would put you back in slavery.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Why I asked if you had documented or started documenting your family histories, that I've been talking to my first nieces and nephews. My mom, she's 87, and you know how families hide it, keep secrets, and there's stuff which I had the privilege of knowing, which most of my family don't even know that they are not aware that I know. And, so when my first nephew and my first nieces, who are in their my first nephew is 29. His elder sisters are in their early 30s. They talk to me all the time, but I come from a very conservative religious Christian religious family. I was Catholic before most of my siblings switched to evangelical, but it's evangelical over here. It's Pentecostal in Nigeria. And we keep our secrets, but secrets that everybody keeps, but I know of everything. So I'm technically the black sheep in the family because I don't do any God or spirituality or anything. I'm outside I'm in the black hole, for lack of a better pun. And I know a lot of things because I still have memories of what I saw before certain people changed. And I talk to the younger ones and I tell them, yes, this person wore miniskirts. This person had an afro. This person wore jeans. This person partied. This person lived a life before you came into existence. And they're like, oh. And I'm like, yes, what I'm trying to do right now is I've been trying for years to have the family document stuff because we lived in Ghana before I was born. My grandfather, during the colonial years, you could transfer from one region to another. So he was a Rolling Stone. He was a police officer, moved to Ghana and married. My grandmother had my mom, and then she died at birth. And then I don't know if my grandfather was tossing the coin, and he will marry Ghanaian, Nigerian, and like that. So by the time that's why he died early. He was like in his 50s, and by the time of his death, he was there were like 10 wives. So by the time there was a retaliation, the Nigerians kicked out Ghanaians at one point in history, early 70s or late 60s. And then Ghana retaliated and kicked out Nigerians. That's the reason why I'm Nigerian, because my mom will end up in Nigeria. We'll lose everything in Ghana. Because my grandfather died, we lost our stuff. There's a whole bunch of first cousins I have who are Ghanaians. Their moms, they stayed with their family in Ghana. So I have cousins who we have same last name, or some we have the original name of my family who grew up Ghanaian. We talk all the time, but they grew up Ghanaian. And that's how I have my Ghanaian family. And, there's history that nobody wants to admit exists. And I'm like, we need to document this. Put aside the Christianity, whatever beef we have.
Colonizers.
I'm
gonna say it.
Well, there's two versions of that, but I don't go as like. But for our West Africa, is colonizers is because we don't have Christianity, we don't even
But then
Islam.
East Africa, you do have Christianity.
That's why I said there's two versions because on East Africa side, and even Islam is a foreign religion on the continent too. Because also colonized, but that's a whole. I don't. You can if you want to get if you're mad, buy my merch and then burn it. They know my rule. But I've been telling people put this in, document it. So now me and my mom, like we spoke yesterday. Actually, it was like one of the first times we haven't fought in months because she does the yelling and I'm a troll now. I just like whatever. Okay, record yourself. Get a recorder. I've told my cousins how to do it, my nephews how to do it, and just record Tell us your version of the history. I've lost my oldest family member. He passed away before this knowledge came to me. But there was stuff he used to tell me. I used to be the only guy who would sit down with him and he would be telling me, oh yeah, this guy in Ghana, this is what used to happen. And I'm like, oh. And then I'm like, I want to go chase girls. That don't make sense. I was like, dang, I wish I understood that back then. I would have been writing down or recording him. So a whole lot of us, we've missed out on this history. So now document it. So why am I bringing this up? Last year, I was fortunate enough to attend an event at Brooklyn Public Library. Shout out to them always. And if you haven't listened to their Banned Books series podcast, please do. It tells you how the banned books problem is just stupid. That's it. It's just stupid. And there was a Alaji, I've forgotten his first name, Alaji Haidara. He's from Mali. He's in charge of the project to digitalize the manuscripts, the Malian manuscripts. In 2012, the Islamic jihadists who are currently still fighting in Mali to this day, when people say, oh, military coup is good, those people don't know what they're talking about. If you've never lived under military government, okay, come talk to me. I'll tell you what it was like to be in school and be pulled out when the military took over and they kill people that day. And you can come to talk the F France. Yeah, go get shots first. When the military jihadists took over in 2012, what was the first thing they did? They went to homes and were destroying Malian manuscripts that have existed before the 12th century. That's history. That's African history that's written. African history is not only just what the kings did. It's what every family was doing. And you have, if you want proof that homosexuals existed in Africa all this time, it is there. Because your family has everybody who's existed. That thing that you are ashamed to show everybody now, it's written down. If you want proof that there were people from all over the world hanging out in what is now Mali today, it's in there. Because there were people, there's proof that the king, King Dynasty, that's how you say it, Qing from China, King, they were there. There was people from Rome, there were scholars. If a whole bunch of men from different parts of the world sat down at a university to study, men don't know how to sit down and not think about sex. They were having sex. So there were a whole bunch of children who were giving birth to, and those children exist to this day. There's a caste system that exists in Mali to the present. They're considered slaves. It's nothing to do with France. It's a system Mali has had for a long time. Everybody has caste systems. But that's a whole different thing. There's a reason why those Islamic jihadists went after the manuscripts to destroy it. And Alaji Haidara had been trying to digitalize it way back then. Why are you trying to destroy proof of your people's history? It's because they want you to see it as, we are the only ones that will tell you this is what you should live by. This is how you exist. You exist by what we tell you. And if certain people had not intervened, those guys would have destroyed everything. And it was after that family started running to Haji Haidara saying, digitalize it. Okay, we are fine with you having our secrets and putting it in the cloud. Because people were ashamed to let their secrets out. And when he was explaining this, I was like, oh, it makes sense. One important thing that came out from meeting him that day was, there's a name called Usman Danfodio. Every Nigerian knows that name. If you are Islamophobic in Nigeria, that man is responsible for one of the biggest divides in Nigeria because he brought the Islamic jihad to Nigeria. But there's two versions of him, because everybody who's in the south of Nigeria is like, oh, this guy is a problem of Nigeria. He brought Islam. He was going to conquer the whole Nigeria, bring Islam to the ocean, and make us live under Sharia law. In Mali, there's a book that he wrote. Same thing was protected by that manuscript. His book was about how to treat women when they are pregnant, how to treat a woman who's carrying a baby. It even includes abortion rights. That does not exist in Nigeria, because in Nigeria, it's like a hardcore version. It's like, this guy is so... Is the worst version of a human being. That is what Nigerians go by. Whether it's the Muslims, whether it's the Christians, everybody just has a war. And in Mali, there's a version of this man that was poetic. There's a version of this man that's telling you women deserve rights. And this man is talking about, I'm sitting down there like, what on earth are you talking about? I grew up seeing this man as my enemy. I grew up seeing this man as, even to this day, go on Nigerian platforms, bring his name up. People will be cursing you if you are not from the religion that he's from. And that's why I tell people, like, if you know your family, you should start documenting it. If you know anybody in your family, get a recorder, record them. It doesn't have to be a podcast. If you want to make a podcast, that's fine. But please document your family history.
One of my grandfathers, just a personal story, is kind of painful. One of my grandfathers was alcoholic, and he would beat my grandmother. This is on my mother's side. And, I used to wonder, because if I looked like, his father was the first member of my family to have a college degree. And before that, this is the branch that, I've yet to find the slaves in there, right? Yeah. And I used to wonder, well, what happened to my grandfather? Why did he drink like that? Why did he beat my grandmother like that? She eventually left him. And then I did some research. And one of the most violent lynchings happened in the town he grew up in. And this man that they lynched, they tore him to pieces, dragged him in the streets. Because why? He was the wealthiest man, black man, the wealthiest man in Abbeville, South Carolina. And my grandfather, his father, was the same age as this man. So it's a small town. They knew this man. And what happened was, when they killed this man, it was brutal, right? When they murdered him, then many black people left that town. And he was one of them, but he was 20 years old. So he left, he went to Columbia, South Carolina. That's where he met my grandmother. So that's why, and also, another thing is his mother died when he was 13. But the lynching and just the hopelessness of it, and that's what caused him to be an alcoholic. That's what made him bitter. That's why. Now, this is not an excuse. This is just the cause of what appeared. Because I could see, like, what happened to him. Like, you could say, like, the family was like this, and then, but with him, it went, it just, and that was why. So it's not only documenting, but you can even find the answers.
Yeah.
Certain questions you have about certain relatives, or why am I here? How did I get in this city, for instance?
It's important to have documentation, and because, like me, I only have the story of our name. How the people who always think I'm from the clan, because I'm from Bayelsa, and people always think I'm from River State. My last name Harry, because Harry clan is huge in River State, and they always assume I'm from River State. I'm like, no, I'm from Bayelsa. People like, no, you don't know your state. I'm like, no. If you meet a Harry, probability is 1. You're from River State, but we are not Rivers. But our original name is supposed to be Ari, A-R-I. Now, a version I've gotten is that whether my great-grandfather or great-great-great-great, because at that time it was only boys who usually went to school, was in class, and somebody couldn't pronounce that, Ari, and it started changing to Harry. And it stuck. But there have been many people on the podcast, different parts of the world, who that happened to. Even a friend now who's moved back to Buenos Aires. His great-grandfather was a Jewish family escaping from Russia, and they went through England, and they couldn't pronounce their name, so their name changed to Charles. Because I was like, how are you the Jewish first? How are you the first Argentinian I've met whose last name is Charles? I've seen German names, but I've never seen Charles. And he says it on the podcast. But yeah, my great-grandfather was escaping from Russia, Jewish name, and he says the name, which I can't recall right now. And they went through England, and somebody couldn't pronounce their name in England, and just went. And his great-grandfather didn't understand English, so they just wrote Charles on the passport. And when they arrived in Argentina, their name was Charles, and they stuck with Charles. But I don't know if that's my family's, if that's the real version, because there's another version of the story I've heard once in a while. But now there are some family members, like my uncle in Netherlands. His name is Ari. I'm like, okay, that's our name, but nobody wants to confirm. So little things like that, it's good to just have it documented, and then you know for a fact, okay, if I'm choosing to change my name, I change it. If I'm not, then fine. But everybody has a right to, you know. So the final question I'll ask before you know, I will wrap up here, because we're still gonna have a part 2. This question is the question I normally begin with, but I did it different this time. I flipped it around. So normally I begin with your names. So what is the meaning of your name, and is there a story behind the names that you bear?
Yeah,
Yeah, you can go.
I can say
Well-
yes. Grace is my grandmother's name on my dad's side. She's Igbo. That's her name. My mom was thinking of naming me Greta, but my parents kind of anticipated that they wouldn't be staying in Russia very long. And so then they went with Grace, which was both my grandmother's name and kind of sounded like Greta. And then my middle name is my dad's name. It's Ijoma Peter. And my last name's, my last name's just Nkem. Just the Ijoma Peter Nkem is my dad's name. So that's my name. I think it means, I believe Ijoma means good journey in life. Yeah. And then Nkem, like, I Googled it at one point. I think it means like, I think it has like a, yeah, well, I'm not going to guess. I don't spread disinfo.
No.
Hey,
And
it's all
Kim
good.
means
like
my
darling,
own or
mine.
like
Okay,
mine.
okay, I
Yeah,
thought so.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I've never met someone with the last name Nkem.
I have an uncle whose first name is Nkem.
Yeah, I'm used to
yeah.
Nkem being the first name.
Yeah,
I know some Ijomas.
Oh yeah, Ijemas. I had a crush on an Ijema in final year of secondary school. Ijema, there was an Ijema who moved to my high school, and yeah, I've never met an Ijema who was dark skinned too.
I have.
Now I'm thinking. Oh yeah, no, I have. There was one in Lagos. IJ. That's a short for Ijema.
My
IJ.
friend Ijoma's.
Yeah, EJ or
IJ.
IJ. Yeah, depending on where you are, it's either IJ or EJ. Yeah, but yeah, there was. But majority of the Ijemas I've met are always light skinned, no matter where you are in Nigeria. I don't know why.
That's the stereotype.
I just thought about it. Wow. Because I remember one of the jokes we used to have in Port Harcourt was bride price for Ijoma is more expensive.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious.
Port Harcourt boys always have, we're mad comedians, but yeah, it's like, oh, you want to go after Ijoma? But you don't have money, you can't afford that Ijoma. No, it's the bride price.
Yeah, no, that's it's still there.
Yeah.
It's still in full effect in
That
Nigeria.
is the one. I'm like, if I had ended up in Nigeria or stayed in Russia, I'd have a very different life. In the U.S., I'm just coasting right down the middle, like never thinking about it. Like in New York specifically,
It
I
seems like
certainly
you'd be
thought
able to
about
express yourself easier and more directly here than Russia or Nigeria, really. Yeah.
Like, I mean, specifically in New York. New York, I'm definitely like, I don't believe in American exceptionalism, but I believe in New York City exceptionalism.
Yeah.
It really just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That's why as soon as
If I'm overseas, I tell people ask me where I'm from, I say New York.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, because it's very specific, but also it's less controversial. You know, I mean, I'm a New Yorker. Hey,
When I was
yo,
in Germany, I was
come
not
on.
telling people. I was like, oh, no, I'm from New York. Don't worry.
Oh, that's cool.
I know how to take the train.
Yeah, I'm in New York too. Because the first day I arrived in New York, and I woke up the first morning, I looked outside my window. I'm like, Brooklyn. I'm like, yeah, this is home. This is home for me. I'd lived in Texas for 2 years before coming here. I was like, okay, this is home. I knew I was home. Yeah. All right. Who wants to go next with the meaning of their name and if there's a story behind it?
I can go. My first name Obinna means father's heart.
Okay.
And I think that's usually given to firstborn sons.
That was going to be my next question.
Right. So it's my name could not be any more in Igbo land. It could not be any more common. It's basically like John Smith. It's very very basic in Igbo land. I'm not sure, to your point about where your family's name, documenting your family's history. I'm not exactly sure where Elechi comes from. Our last name, our family name, it means to look to God.
Okay.
and the phrase is Elechi. That's the sentence, and then it's shortened to Elechi.
So is it Equatorial or is it Igbo?
It's Igbo.
Okay.
But funny you say that. Like our family, we're from southeast where Igbo land is,
Mhm.
but our families, like my grandmother was from Buguma, which is Rivers.
Oh, yeah. Buguma is Ijana.
Right.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, that's my people.
my grandmother was from there
Okay.
and married an Igbo man.
Yeah. Well, we have
So-
a lot of intermarriage.
our and that's an interesting thing is like the borders are very loose.
Yes.
His before borders were drawn.
Yes.
So our family, the like my dad is bilingual in Rivers and Igbo.
Oh.
And you know, so that generation of his family, they speak both.
Okay. Nice.
And so that's where my name comes from. I still don't know exactly where Elechi comes from per se, but that's where my name comes from and what it means.
Hey, that's homework for next time you come to the studio. So Amir.
Well, I chose my name, Amir Bey,
Mhm.
and it's a little story. I was born Julian Chirot,
Okay.
Julian Gilbert Chirot. That Gilbert was my godmother's name, last name. And the name Julian comes from, associated with my father. My father's name was Romeo.
Oh.
And he was named after his uncle, who was named after my great-great-grandfather, who was a cabinet maker. Rome DuPont
Okay.
was his name. And he was supposed to be illiterate, but he had his own system of measurement. So as somebody who built houses and things like that, he had his own system.
Yeah.
Right. And so the name Chirot comes from my great-grandfather, who was a sailor. And we don't know whether, because he was Quechua. So we don't know whether did he pick this name as a sailor? Like, in other words, was he like an Indian boy from Ecuador who didn't have a last name, and then sailing, he said, I'll take that name.
Okay.
Not sure,
I
you
see,
know?
I see what you're saying.
So that was my name. And then in my wild California period, I had the name Gypsy.
Oh.
So that's why it's a little traveling here with my name.
Yeah.
So Gypsy for a few years. And then, people said, that's not a real name, blah, blah, blah. But one day my brother said, hey, instead of calling yourself Gypsy, check out this guy here. His name was Amir Bey. And he was somebody who was legendary in Egypt. He escaped a ambush perpetrated by Muhammad Ali, who was the Caliph of Cairo at the time, and Napoleon Bonaparte against the Mamluk Beys. And there was an old 19th century print where the guy looked just like me, sort of.
Oh.
I mean, he had those robes and all that stuff that they wore, but the face was really like mine. So then I took that name, Amir Bey. And I decided, okay, I'm going to take that name. I was in the bathtub at the time, and like I could feel the water charging in my feet as I said, okay, this is going to be my name. So I'm not Muslim, because Amir Bey might suggest that. And Amir is actually very ancient. It goes back to ancient Egypt. It means a governor or a prince or something, some kind of leader. So Amir is very ancient. It goes back, way back. And so that's my name. So it's a personal thing. And then my son, Amon Bey, has that name. He's a dancer.
Oh.
And then his daughter, my granddaughter, has that last name. So I guess I created a branch that way. And then now I think about, what I know now about my history and everything like that. I say, well, Chirot is not really a name that I can actually say was a slave owner's name. I'm not sure whether he took that name, whether it was the name of his father, whose name was Juan, So I don't know, but there it is. And I think one more thing about that, and that is that the the Sioux and other Native Americans, they had a name you were born with that your parents gave you, but that was your childhood name. And then when you became an adult, you had a vision and you selected your own name. So I feel that there's a consistency in that, I'm not really disavowing or ignoring my family history, but I chose a name that relates to who I am, as an individual.
Yeah.
There's so much in the name. I had one relative who criticized me. Well, if you do all this family research and all that, and how come you change your name? But women change their names when they get married.
True.
Right? Or I've even seen it where a woman they make a deal. They say, okay, if it's a boy, then it's going to have my last name. And if it's a girl, to the husband, then it's going to be, So in other words, name changing is not like sacrilegious.
No, it's not.
Or disavowing
It's
anything.
not.
So
It's not. I'm glad you brought up that point. Yeah, I agree with you on that. All right. So I'd love to continue, but we need to end part 1 here. So thank you to everyone who's been with us. Stay tuned for part 2 and keep the support and love coming in. Thanks for listening to White Label American. If you enjoyed the show, please give a 5-star review on your favorite podcast app. You can follow the show on all social media platforms. Visit the White Label American website for links for donations, episodes, feedback, guests, merch, and newsletter. Don't forget to download the free White Label American app on the Google Play Store and Apple coming soon. Thank you for the privilege of your company.